they've got to have their wiggles out. So yeah, if you haven't heard anything, like, you got to let your kids have to get their wiggles out. So that's just a fact of life. Your kids can't be still all the time. So if that's what you're expecting out of your kids, then you need to change your expectations.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The Sword, the Bow, and the Axe, Episode 5, Part 2 of our discussion on discipleship and parenting with our wives, and talking specifically about how do we do this? We talked about the why. Now, how do we apply those things that we talked about before? And what are the ways we found joy in our parenting, and then maybe some pitfalls to avoid along the way? I do want to warn you, in this episode, we had some audio difficulties. We had Locke awake the whole time during the entire recording, and so just had to make some changes on the fly. And so there's some echoes and some weird things that go on through some of it, but such is life with kids. And so just do hope that you're gracious to us. I'm not an audio engineer, but we trust that the Lord will use this to be helpful to those of you that are listening. So without further ado, Part 2 of Discipleship and Parenting. Yeah, so that's just a really good segue, Stephen, into how do we do this, right? So we talked about the why. Why should we do this? The Bible commands it, yes, in multiple places. So how do we do that? What does that practically look like? And I think one thing. So when I first met Stephen, we go to lunch at Whataburger on North First and Pioneer Drive, and we sit in this booth and we're eating a burger, and Stephen, so how old was Leah? Leah was probably 8 or 9 at the time. Probably, yeah, about that age. And Stephen goes, "Hey, do you think," and he refutes this story, but I will never forget it. He says, "Hey, do you think that Leah loves the Lord and that she believes that he's the king of the world?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." And he pounds his fist on the table and he says, "You need to do everything you can to know." And what he meant by that, and I'm so thankful for it, because at the time in my life I needed that from somebody, was not that I control my child's salvation, but that I need to do everything I can so that I can look back and go, "Hey, I did what I was supposed to. I was faithful and obedient to the Lord, and you got to let the cards lie where they lie. God is sovereign." And so you pray and you hope that he gives and grants faith to your child.
Right.
But, are you being obedient in the day-to-day things? And so I say that to segue into, how do we do it? What does that look like day to day? And so one of the ways that we can do that, and that's kind of this instructive discipline that we talked about, is family worship. And so Nathan and Katie, or whoever wants to chime in, but you want to start with, what is family worship, and then how do you guys do that? Nathan and Katie, how do y'all do family worship specifically? And then Stephen and Ashley, if y'all want to share more, you're more than happy to.
So family worship is really simple. It's been practiced for a long time. I mean, at least since Deuteronomy 6. But more recently, in the last couple of decades, there's a small book put out by a man named Don Whitney called Family Worship. And it's probably the most helpful, but also the shortest book on the topic. So if you, for some reason, you haven't picked that up, which I'm pretty sure it like almost every member of Southside probably has that book. But if for some reason you don't, pick that book up. And
yeah.
What's that?
I said, if you don't, hit me up. I got like 10 copies in my office.
They've dedicated their baby. They have it, don't they?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so he summarizes family worship in read, sing, pray. So you develop a pattern, a rhythm of gathering your family together on a regular basis throughout the week. And you spend time reading the Bible, praying in light of what you've read, praying about things about your family, or read, singing a good song together, and then praying. And so starting small is great. So if you don't have a rhythm of already doing that as a family, 15 minutes is a really good, 10 to 15 minutes is a really good starting point for that. And especially with young kids, that's a great place to begin. Maybe at the end of dinner, or at the beginning, or during your bedtime routine, something like that. We do it probably on average 3 to 4 nights a week when we're consistent. There's seasons where we're not as consistent as we ought to be. But when we're consistent, 3 to 4 nights a week, when we're having dinner, we'll finish up. One of our children, I won't name him, but he's a slower eater than the rest. So we're typically doing family worship while he's finishing up his meal. And so he'll sing with his mouth full sometimes. But we read through a storybook Bible. As our kids get older, I think we'll shift to actually reading passages of Scripture. But especially when they're young, we just want them to see the big picture of the Bible. So we're doing Kevin DeYoung's the Bible storybook Bible. It's the most confusing name of any storybook Bible out there, but it's a great one.
So the biggest storybook Bible.
There you go. Yeah. That one. It's great. So we'll do that. Then we typically pick a song that's in our church's rotation of songs, because we not only just want to sing good songs, but we want to sing songs that our kids will know and be able to sing with the congregation. And then we'll pray. I'll invite my kids to pray. I think it's good to give your kids an opportunity to develop the habit and discipline of prayer. But then specifically as a father, I'll always close our time and just kind of pray over my family, pray in light of what we've read, and then just pray the Lord's blessing on what's going on in our lives. So that's what our habit looks like.
Yeah, same here. It's simple. Read, sing, pray. Read, pray, sing. That's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
We sing at the end. Sometimes all we do is sing. There are times where, guys, we're only going to be singing tonight, or tonight is prayer around, we're going to sit and pray. So, I think that, in prescribing some of these things like family worship, what can happen, because I agree with everything Nathan just said, and we practice that same model very similarly. So I'll just speak to the families that maybe want to grab on to the letter of the law and miss the spirit, or they'll want to grab on to the tangible thing that they know they can implement. Again, it's like, we know we can do the duty. We can put forth the effort. We can make this happen if that's what it takes, yet miss the heart that you want to have transferred to your kids, which is a love for God. And if I'm exasperating my kids, provoking them to anger because I'm making them sit through Dad reading 3 passages in Isaiah because we got to get through the book in this month, then we're actually moving backwards than forwards in discipling our kids. Not to say that 3 passages in Isaiah wouldn't be a really rich family gathering time of Scripture, but you got to know your tribe, and you got to discern the waters. And I think that's just wisdom. And so fathers need to lead out on this and understanding, like, what's the temperature of my home? What are we ready for? If you've been going through, exegetical works and been reading deep theology, it's not probably the time at the dinner table with your 4 and 5-year-old to try to rehash, the exclusivity of Christ, or the dual nature of Christ's person. Like, you've got to be able to know your audience and make it fun and engaging. And so it's this idea, I think Doug Wilson says it, that we have to lower the standard so that our kids love the standard. Not that we dismiss the biblical standards of what's right and good, but we lower it to the point where it's reachable and attainable. We don't raise it up so high it crushes them, and we're not bringing it so low that it feels like we're just blowing it off. But we bring it to the level where everybody enjoys reaching it, can get it, and it just continues to get better as we engage the Lord with our minds, our hearts, our song, and we do things in a way that's that meets our kids where they are. So I think that's right and good. I think that's what we have to do.
Can I speak to the wives for a second? So I don't know if I've told you this, Stephen. Maybe we've talked about it, but when we first started really being consistent with family worship, I have a teaching background. So I just had this picture of what family worship should look like, that the kids should be sitting and listening, or should be, I don't know, in a circle or whatever it is. And that just wasn't what it looked like. And that's not how Stephen does things. But I had to let him lead and not try to insert myself into that role, because it's not my role. And it's really awesome just to see when I've just shut up and let him lead, and that our kids totally respond to the way he does it. And it's just a sweet, sweet time. So wives, don't try to take over and think your husbands are not doing it right, because they are, and God will use them, even if it's not how you would do it.
And even if they're doing it wrong, sometimes you just got to let them fail. And
you just pray.
the next time.
That's right.
And then just remind them that next time, maybe we shouldn't start with a song with all the tambourines, and we should start with like the actual story first, right? But I think too, with family worship, it's part of the instructive discipline of being able to sit down and sit still for a period of time to listen to, a story of the Bible, so that whenever they are in Sunday morning service with us, that they can do that, and then they can be a part of the singing, because they are hearing those songs whenever we are doing them in family worship. I know that like where our girls go to school, they have a hymn of the month, and so we try to get our younger boys to be able to participate with their hymn of the month too, and just singing that over and over with them, so that they are hearing those words all the time. The more often you do it, the more discipled you are with it, and diligent, the easier sometimes it can become, and the easier it is to be able to transfer what they're learning in family worship over to a Sunday morning or a Sunday evening, or even in their own Sunday school class. They're just able to do it better.
Yeah, I think Lincoln, just this past Sunday, he was like, "Dad, do I know this song?" I'm like, "I don't think you know this song." "Okay. Are we gonna sing the Gloria Patri?" "Well, I don't know if we're gonna sing the Gloria Patri. We might sing the doxology." "Is that the long one?" "Yeah, that's the long one, buddy." "Okay." So yeah, just getting them familiar with those, and then they hear them on Sunday mornings, and sometimes they will start singing it, and they don't even know that they know the song or that they're singing it. It's just kind of comes natural, because you've kind of incline them to that aroma of, hey, we're going to sing, and this is a good thing. The Lord's given us this gift of singing. And so, yeah. Anything else to add there on family worship?
Do it.
Do it. Just do it. I'll say this, it will be awkward at first, and you'll feel weird, and you'll be like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. Is this even helpful? Just do it. And do it consistently, whatever that looks like. It doesn't have to be 7 nights a week. Like, start with a low bar. Just go, hey, we're going to do this 1 night a week, 2 nights a week, 3 nights a week, like whatever that is for you. And it'll be less awkward. And then you'll be like, oh, this is just a normal part. And your kids will do that too. And by God's grace, they'll start asking for it, where they're like, hey, why are we doing family worship? What's going on here? So,
like, well, because it's 9:30 and it's past your bedtime.
Yeah, but I need to hear about Jesus before I go to bed. Well, I appreciate that, but you need to go to sleep.
Yeah. And Stephen made the point earlier of giving your kids what they can handle. I think Jesus actually sets the standard for us. So John 16:12, he's telling his disciples, I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth, for he will not speak on his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will declare to you the things that are to come. So in part, Jesus is saying, he wants his disciples to be fully formed, but they're not going to be fully formed today. Same thing with your parenting, same things with your kids. Wherever your home is right now, you probably have a picture of where you want it to be. It's not going to be there tomorrow. You have a picture of where you want your kids to be. They're not going to get there tomorrow. So same with family worship. You may have a picture of, we're going to sit down at our dinner table and we're going to spend 30 minutes and we're going to read 3 passages and we're going to sing 2 songs and everybody's going to pray. That may be a great goal. But your family's not going to be there tomorrow. So start where you are, because this is what Jesus does with you. He starts you where you are, and then he moves you bit by bit, inch by inch, every day closer to himself. So especially if you're leading the charge in family worship, specifically fathers, like start where your family is, and then move little by little to get them. So it might be that you're reading just one story, and you see one verse of one song, and then you say a short prayer because that's all your kids can handle. That is a great place to start, because your kids are not going to they're not going to arrive at maturity tomorrow, but the little bits that you do today will get them there eventually. by God's grace.
Yeah, it's really good. All right, so family worship, do it. So next question, and I think I want each of the ladies to answer this question. Yes, the ladies. Man, you can do it too, but I just feel like you guys are you're in the trenches each and every day, and not that men aren't, but you ladies specifically are fighting the good fight, and yeah. So what are two ways that you have found? What were two ways you found most helpful in your daily discipleship of your children?
I think for me, one way that's helpful is just having friends that are there with me, doing it daily, that can speak truth to what I'm going through or what I am dealing with in the moment, or even reaching to trusted older women too that have already walked through some of the waters that we're walking through with our kids, and just getting wise counsel and wise wisdom from them. So not only being able to lean on others, but also then taking it and applying it.
Yeah. I think we talked about this earlier, kind of went into this of just practicing things like beforehand. Like a lot of times when I'm with my kids and we're going to go into a store, I prep them like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is my expectation. If these things aren't met, then here's the consequence. So they know and I know we're both accountable to each other, the parent and the child, of this is what I say I'm going to do. And if you obey, things will go well for you. And if you do not, then we will come back and have the rod of discipline administered. So that's helpful for me just in a really practical sense of taking the kids and doing things with them. I have a lot of other moms around me who are like, wait, you take 5 kids to the grocery store? And I'm like, well, yeah, we have to eat. And I didn't plan well to, make my list and have it either ordered or shipped or whatever. Like, yeah, I have to go in. But it's just being okay with things being messy and not going well and having to deal with that, being real with it. And then also just preparing my own heart, like setting up expectations well. Does that make sense?
I think for me, like being in the Word, I can't teach them the Word if I don't know the Word myself. And so I found that like when I have seasons where I'm reading my Bible regularly and I'm meeting with others and talking about the Bible with others, find myself being more patient with my kids. And I think I've seen whenever I have seasons, maybe I'm not in the Word regularly, I find myself being more impatient and more quick to anger. So, preaching the Word to myself helps me to preach the Word to them,
For sure.
Yeah, I think leaning on your spouse, because I'll get a text in the morning or in the afternoon, and it'll be, hey, pray for me, or pray, we're having a hard morning, and I need you to pray. And prayer is powerful. Prayer works. And so, one thing that I don't do a good enough job at is reminding myself to pray for my wife during the day while I know I'm working away. And maybe I need to set reminders or just be reminded to pray. I try to be reminded at lunch, I'll send Ashley a text. How's it going? How's the morning been? Just to check in. And praise God, most of the time we're having a good day. It's a normal day where we've had to spank the littles and be on it with discipline as we do most days when they're this age. But nothing out of the ordinary, and things are great. There are days where it's like, man, no one can get it together. Everybody's falling apart. Every kid, every adult is just having a hard time. So we got to reset. But prayer is powerful in that way. So partner with your spouse to help and pray. And
I think too, in those moments where I do feel like, man, everything is just chaotic and we can't get it together, I will just stop and pray like by myself, and then invite my kids into that. Like, hey, we're having a hard time. Let's go to the Lord. And they see me modeling that. And then sometimes I'll have them also like, okay, you pray. You've been struggling with this. You ask the Lord to help you, to be kind to your sibling. That's helpful too. Just, I think the power of prayer, sometimes we don't realize how God works through our prayers.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I've found to be really helpful is modeling confession, forgiveness, repentance to our kids through one, sometimes having to confess to them like, hey, I'm sorry. I was angry when I disciplined you, or I was angry and whatever, will you forgive me for that? And bringing them into that. But then also like Deanna and I modeling it ourselves. And so we have kind of a rhythm or a cadence that we try to teach the kids. And I think they do a really good job of it. And it's just, hey, I'm sorry that I did this. And it's very specific. I'm sorry that I punched you in the face. Will you forgive me? Because
punched the face.
With a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old boy, that happens quite often.
Let's just say every day.
Yeah. So, hey, I'm sorry that I punched you in your face. Will you forgive me? And then there's the yes, I will forgive you. And then there's the hug, make up, and then go on. And so even when Deanna and I are needing to do that, we model that for them as well. So it's not just, hey, you guys do this, but no, we do this as well, because this is something that's good and right, and loving and honoring to the Lord, and then also to each other. So that's been really helpful for the kids to be able to see and do. So
Yeah,
they're just niños getting their wiggles out.
they've got to have their wiggles out. So yeah, if you haven't heard anything, like, you gotta let your kids have to get their wiggles out. So that's just a fact of life. Your kids can't be still all the time. So if that's what you're expecting out of your kids, then you need to change your expectations. They're wiggly, and that's okay. The two things, one, Ashley, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but I think this is the role that Katie fills really well in our home. She's kind of the coach of our kids. Like, before they go into something new, she's coaching them through it. And that's actually proved really fruitful in our lives recently. We've changed our setting totally. We've changed kind of our education of our oldest son. And so Katie has almost taken on the job of a full-time coach in training our son how to walk into school, how to interact with classmates and all that kind of stuff. And there have been discouraging days, but there have also been encouraging days of where he'll come home and we get a report and it's like, oh, you actually did follow some of the coaching that happened. And so those things have been just really encouraging. So you're going to coach until you're blue in the face. So just have good expectations going in. I think that's probably the point that I'm trying to make overall. Like, have good expectations. Not that everything will go well immediately. In fact, a good expectation is that you will often feel like you're falling flat on your face as a parent. So if you have that expectation going in, and then specifically as husbands, who are not in the trenches in most cases, who are often out of the home, our job when we come home ought to be to reset, to bring perspective into that situation. That's part of what our job is. And when we come home, we're reminding our wives that what they're doing is worthwhile. It will prove fruitful in the long run. Remind them that we're playing the long game. And what helps me to do that so that I can bring proper perspective is having older men in my life who have already raised godly children. That is a really good test for me. Like, hey, is what we're experiencing totally out of the norm? And it helps me see, okay, what we're experiencing is actually fairly normal. We've got to continue to trust the process, trust the Lord. So husbands, get older men who have raised godly kids in your life, and run your parenting by them, and do just like a check on your family through them, and then bring that perspective back to your home, bring it back to your wives, and remind them, hey, we've seen these godly couples raise these godly kids, and this is their counsel, this is their advice, this is their perspective. And those things are just abundantly helpful.
Mm-hmm. And okay, y'all always talk about your friendship, but us wives, we have a really sweet friendship too. And I just think get yourself some solid Christian friends who just are on the same path and thinking and raising their kids the same way, because it just is so encouraging and helpful in this journey. So thankful for them.
Yeah, I can remember a time specifically when we were doing home group at the White's old house over off of North 14th
Meadowbrook.
and whatever it was, Meadowbrook. And Deanne, we only had 2 kids at the time. And so, man, that's super weird to think about, but we had 2 kids. And Landry was probably 3 or 4. And she was pretty tough. And it still is pretty tough some days. But she was just having a really hard time, not listening. And Deanne is just like...
I was also like 6-7 months pregnant with Lincoln. So
yeah,
emotions were also very...
yeah. So she was just brought to tears. And Ashley was there to just be like, hey, it's okay. It's going to be okay. So just even that voice of like, you don't have to have it all together. It's going to be all right. Press on, is helpful. So ladies, get yourself some solid, godly women in your lives. And I think the same thing that Nathan said for men, like ladies, find you some other ladies who have raised kids. And now they have these adult children who are also flourishing in the Lord. Find them and get to know them, and ask them questions. I think that can be really helpful.
And if you're listening to this podcast and you have already raised children, because by our demographics research, there may be some of you here, initiate that. Go find younger men, go find younger women, and insert yourself into their lives and say, hey, I'm not perfect, but the Lord has been faithful to me. I want to help encourage you through this process.
Jamie White, Nathan's talking to you. All right. So next question is, so we talked about some good, helpful ways that we found. What are maybe some struggles, or maybe some things? Maybe a better question is, what are some things that maybe you've tried that have gone wrong to avoid doing in your discipleship?
There's too many things in my head. I can't think of just one. Well, I mean, I've made plenty of mistakes, and I've had to repent before my kids many times, and I honestly think that's all in the sovereignty of God too. That He, He allows me that to be the chief repenter in my home, and there's days I definitely regret. There's been ways I've cut my kids down with my words, or been too harsh with my discipline, or too demanding, or back myself into a corner. Here's one thing I'll say, get less general. Never lie to your kids, and never empty threat. So I think that's the crux of one thing. I think that's maybe something that parents will fall into. We'll kind of hold out threats like, if you don't eat this green bean, you won't eat dessert for 3 years, and you're like, actually, that's false. Like, you're not going to be able to hold anything to that. If you don't go to bed right now, it'll be worse for you. You'll be grounded for whatever. You fill in the blank. Point is, don't over threaten, don't under promise, don't under deliver on your promise. Like, if you say something, mean it and follow through. I think that's the takeaway, right? Is consistent and follow through. If you say, son, if you don't obey and do this, there will be a consequence. You will be getting a spanking, or you will have this, and they don't do it, then there is your call. They called your bluff, Dad, and you need to be measured, controlled, and administer that discipline. And when your kids know, oh, I don't get 3 counts, 10 seconds, whatever it is, to disobey before I finally obey. I actually have to obey right away. And I'm not saying you can't give your kids warnings, you do, but you have to follow through at some point, and you have to be ready to, and don't ever lie to your kids. Don't ever say, you're not going to have dessert for 3 years. Like, that's just a lie. You're not going to do that. Or, fill in the blank, tell them the truth, and then follow through.
Yeah, I think it's, oh, go ahead, Ashley.
Okay. I think sometimes I can get distracted by thinking about all the work that needs to be done, whether that be cleaning or cooking or errands or whatever it is, that I lose sight of my children. And so I think of that quote that says, children are not a distraction from more important work. They are the most important work. And I want to like frame that, put it up in our house just as a reminder to me. I think sometimes my kids can feel like I don't see them when I'm so focused on, no, I just need to get dinner on the table. Like, Dad's going to be home. We have this and then bedtime, and like, we just have things to do. And I'm like, hold on a second. I have to like come back to reality and remember the whole purpose is for them. I'm doing these things for them unto the Lord, right? So that, I think, is ways I see that I've failed many times, is just like trying to crank out things and not seeing my kids and this great gift that I have to get to be home with them. Sometimes I could take that for granted. So I have to pray and ask God to show me their little hearts all day long.
Yeah, I was gonna piggyback on what Stephen said, and that quote actually is by C.S. Lewis. It's I think Deanne's literally said the same thing. Like, I just want to frame that and put it somewhere. It's just so good. But what Stephen was saying was, I think there's a book by Ginger Hubbard, Don't Make Me Count to Three. And it's just really good because, I think growing up, my mom probably did this, and it's not an indictment on her parenting or anything, but you just don't know what you don't know. When you tell your kid, like, hey, I'm going to count to 3, and if you don't do it by the time I count to 3, you're basically telling them, hey, you got 3 more seconds to continue doing whatever sinful act it is. And so you go, okay, well, it's just 3 seconds. But then you think about it in adulthood, and it's, well, I can just keep doing this for another 3 years, and then in 3 years, I'll stop doing it. And so it's actually not healthy to do that. And I think sometimes it's like a convenience thing for us parents to go, I don't want to get up from the table, stop doing what I'm doing, and go do whatever it is that I need to go do in discipline. So I'm going to tell them stop doing it by the time I count to 3, and just hope that they obey. And then sometimes I may follow through, sometimes I won't. So it's just kind of a pitfall for parents, and it's not good it's not healthy for the kids either, because they're just kind of being trained and taught that it's okay to sin for another 3 seconds, 5 seconds, whatever it is. So
to piggyback off on that, I don't know if this is even related to what we're talking about, but like chasing your children. My kids have run from me, and I will stop and tell myself this. You have to remind myself, I will not chase you. You will obey. And then I'm like, don't move. Because I have to stick to that. They have to know, like, no, you don't get to run from mom. So do that early.
I'll chase them out into the busy street to rescue them. But I have to, when they run from you in the store, it's like, you come to me. And when you don't, I think you've earned yourself one spanking, you can make it 2. You've earned yourself discipline. Now let's not add to it.
What if your kid runs around the worship center while church is still going on?
Church is over.
Do you chase them then, or do you just let them laugh and just continue to run around?
Then somebody please stop them. Just
they did not know church wasn't over.
But please, somebody else just stop them when they see them.
But what if the
never
rest
happened
of us
or
are
anything?
enjoying it, and it's making us
total
laugh?
hypothetical.
We literally said this Sunday morning in the announcements. Parents, if you see, let's not have your kids run after service. We do that announcement regularly. It's pretty tight in our services lately. And I said, and I think it was Cooper said, and adults, if you see a child running, stop them. And you have the full permission of every parent in this room right now to bring a reminder of the rules to that kid. So be the adult. It was basically that reminder, like, oh yeah, I don't have to just sit back and watch these kids and be like, man, I wish someone would get a hold of these children and be like, hey, they're not your kids, but right now they could be, and just go ahead and grab them and say, hey, don't run, or hey, remember the rules.
Hey, don't stick paper towels in the sink and
Oh
turn
my
stuff
goodness.
Too soon.
on. Like,
Too soon.
Too soon.
Too soon.
Man, I had
Again, guys, these are all hypotheticals. If you're listening to this, our kids have never done any of these things, okay?
These are not our children that we're talking
My
about.
7-year-old never flooded the fellowship hall bathroom on purpose. So good stuff, guys.
McCravey, anything to add to that? 2 things to avoid, pitfalls to avoid, or ditches to avoid?
Something I find myself doing a lot is setting unrealistic expectations for my kids. Expecting them to have arrived at some level of maturity that they just don't possess. And so I'm expecting them to respond to situations as mature, regenerate men. And instead, they respond to situations as immature, unregenerate boys. And I get angry because my boys have not arrived at maturity yet. And so it's just, it's self-righteousness on my part. It's unrealistic expectations on them. And so just understanding who your kids are, not being surprised when they respond as their nature would lead them to. And then understanding that their responses to those situations are opportunities to show them a better way. Something that Katie and I try to remind ourselves of pretty regularly is the issues we face in our parenting are not, these are not distractions from our parenting. This is the job. The job is to parent them through these issues. Our issues are not hindrances to our parenting. But these are the opportunities for our parenting. And man, that's so easy to say and so hard to actually live out. But we think that's true. So got to remind ourselves of it constantly.
That's good.
No, it's good. Well, all right. Hey, Rod.
Yes, it's 11 o'clock. Locke is over here playing peekaboo passy with me. So, parenting. There you go. I had another thought, but it left my brain. That's my life right now. So, I'll share it another time, probably. Maybe not. Y'all have anything else to add? I had one last question, but I think we've pretty well covered it. Any final closing thoughts on how to parent and disciple your kids well, or just anything along those lines?
I think it's important to remember, like we can do all these things, but in the end, it's the Lord who saves. And so I have to tell myself that, because I think if I do all the right things, I can control his salvation, and that's not the case. That doesn't mean I shouldn't work and shouldn't disciple, but in the end, it's the Lord who saves. And I need to be more diligent to pray to that end.
Yeah, Russell Eckert once said to me that you have to raise your kids like an Arminian, but sleep like a Calvinist. So you've got to do all the things, but go to sleep resting your head on the pillow, knowing that it's the Lord's sovereign hand that's going to grant grace and repentance to them, and faith and repentance. So I just thought that's really good advice.
Yeah, I'm totally going to butcher this, but I tried to find it and I couldn't find it. But I'm pretty sure there's a Spurgeon quote out there somewhere where he's speaking about the praying life of his mom. And he recalls, if I'm remembering this right, he recalls a time where he remembers his mom praying, and it was something like, Lord, I pray that you would save Charles, and something about the fact, I thank you that my conscience is clear, that I have led him to you, but you have to bring him to yourself, or something along those lines. But it was just, the faithful prayers of the mom, that she was laboring with all the strength the Lord had given her, but she was still entrusting every bit of her son's salvation to the Lord.
What's crazy about that quote, as I'm remembering it, and he says, and she would pray, Lord, and if he turns and rejects you, would this prayer be a witness against him that I would, that I've done everything? And it's kind of like that, and he's like hearing his mom pray, that her prayers would be a witness against him if he ever rejected the Lord, that it would work against him.
That's a woman of faith right there.
I'm telling you what, man. Who's the other theologian that on his deathbed he said, I know that none of you, my children, would dare meet me at the tribunal of Christ in an unregenerate state. And just that sheer like, listen, kids, this is happening, and you better not meet me there in unregenerate. So, yeah.
Yeah,
But it's the Lord that saves.
I think of 2 Timothy, where Paul is saying to it, like, hey, Eunice and Lois were faithful. Your mother and your grandmother were faithful to teach you the ways of the Lord. And so there's just something about a mama who prays for their kids and rears them in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So I would just say in closing, men, lead your families. That means your wife. That means your kids. Have a mission and share that mission with your family. Let it be said and lead well. And then just to the wives, we know you're doing the hard work, and there's going to be days where you're done with the laundry and you don't want to change another dirty diaper. But just know that there is a reward in that. And it's not just the pat on the back or whatever. There's an eternal reward that can come from that. And that's that your kids are followers of the Lord, and they get to share in his glory in eternity. So just hear that as an encouragement. If you're a mom listening to this while you're folding laundry, like, do it with joy to the Lord and gladness, knowing that there's a reward that comes from that. So
Faithful fruitfulness.
that's right.
A lot tomorrow.
All right. Well, that wraps up the episode. I hope it's helpful to you guys, and it's definitely probably not the last thing we'll ever say on discipleship and parenting, but hope this is helpful. So we'll see you next time.
That's been great.